Thank you guys again for watching Principal Living. Today I have a special guest, is Nathan Fave. Nathan Fave has been one of the best all-around adventure racers in the world and captain of the Team Seagate, the highly successful New Zealand adventure racing team. His team has won 6 championships. Nathan's entrepreneurial interests include being director of 5 companies. His philosophy in life is to achieve happiness by doing the things that bring you joy. Nathan lives on Kina Beach in Tasman with his wife and 3 children. If he's not answering his phone, you'll find him at his local golf course. Guys, I would like to welcome Nathan Fave. How you doing, Nathan?
Yeah, I'm very good, thank you. Good, yeah, kia ora from New Zealand.
All right, well, thank you for being here. We really appreciate it. And if you don't mind, Nathan, if you can give a little bit of background as far as what you do and who you are so the audience can know a little bit more about you, please.
Sure, so I grew up in the South Island of New Zealand. It's not a big place. New Zealand has 5 million people, and in the South Island we have 1 million. So we're pretty spread out here in the South Island, and I think it would be fair to say that for many people who live in the South Island, they live here because of the outdoor sporting opportunities. We have a big mountain range that runs down the middle of the South Island called the Southern Alps, and there's many ski areas, there's mountain biking trails, hiking trails. Wherever you live in New Zealand, you're not far from the ocean. So New Zealanders are pretty, I guess, regular users of ocean sports, sailing and kayaking and surfing, things like that. And also we have many big rivers and lakes that we can enjoy. So I grew up with a real interest in outdoor sport and adventure. And, you know, as a teenager, I would start to spend quite a lot of time, my spare time, in the mountains and exploring places and essentially going on adventures with my friends or sometimes just by myself. And then I think as a result of that, I started to have a desire to find a career path that allowed me to spend as much time in the outdoors, in the wilderness, as I could. And through sport, that has enabled me to do that. I was a mountain bike racer for many years. And then some years after that, I sort of got involved in adventure racing, which is, I guess, how I've come to be talking on the show today from the Eco Challenge World's Toughest Race. So I've had an adventure racing career now that has been just over 20 years. And as well as that, I guess my working career has been in a similar pathway in outdoor education, adventure tourism, and things related to the outdoor industry.
So it sounds like you started from a very, very young age. And not only that, but your environment and where you lived actually allowed you to pursue what you actually like, which is going and being outside and going into adventures, you said, by yourself or with friends. Do you think that kind of helped you to, well, it sounds like it, but I mean, the aspect of the environment, do you think really helped you to get you to where you are now?
Yes, I think so. I think I do feel lucky in that where I grew up, especially in that time period, that I had access to the opportunities that I did in order to be outside and do things and explore. Not everyone in the world has those opportunities on their doorstep. Mind you, on saying that, I think that adventure is very accessible to most people if they're kind of open to the sort of possibilities of finding it. But certainly where I live, you know, we are pretty lucky here in New Zealand, and especially the South Island, for those easily accessible opportunities.
Awesome. And as far as the beginning, like you say, you started from a very young age. So did you start by yourself? Was it something that probably your parents kind of got you into, or was it something that just was born within you? Like you just wanted to go outside and be on the mountains, or what was the relation there?
Yeah, it's a good question. Growing up, I have an older brother and a younger sister, so there were three of us in our family. My parents were very supportive of encouraging us children to do whatever it was we were passionate about. And my father was a very keen sports person, so he was an athlete himself in various sports and would always be encouraging of us to be active in the outdoors or playing sports. So all three of us grew up playing what I would consider to be fairly normal team sports for New Zealand, soccer, football, rugby, things like that. So we grew up being very active kids. When I was 16 years old, I found myself on a outdoor adventure program for youth, and that was really the first time that I became, I guess, exposed to more outdoor sport, outdoor adventure sport. So I was on a program with 12 boys, 11 other boys, and we did things like caving and windsurfing and river rafting and hiking. And as a 16-year-old, that was a very significant turning point for me in my life, because I sort of realized that all these adventure sports are out there. And while I had grown up in a sporting family, we hadn't done those sorts of things. So at 16 years old, I was like, wow, there's lots of different things out here, and they're fun, and I enjoy them, and I enjoy this environment. And I think the very significant thing that happened that year on that course when I was 16 was that for the first time in my life, I actually had a career path idea. So up until that point, when someone asked me, what are you going to do when you leave school, or what are you going to do when you grow up? I didn't really have any answers. But after doing this outdoor program, I knew that I wanted a career in the outdoor industry in some shape or form. So
I feel like every time you're in the outdoors, you're out in the middle of nowhere, let's say, and you're getting away from people. There's a sense of, let's say, of search within you, something that kind of gives you in a peaceful kind of mindset, being around nature. Does this happen to you? Is that something that kind of attracts you? Or
absolutely, and I think that's what draws me to regularly be in those environments, is that connection with nature and that simple living, and just, I guess, being disconnected from the busy world that we live in, I find hugely important for me. And I just think for my health on many levels, I just need that time, out in the outdoors, just connecting with nature, and that wide open space, and the simplicity, I think, is a big part of it as well.
so one thing that I want to tell you, just to give the framework, is that here in the show we talk about principles, and we define a principle as a set standard that you won't compromise, something that you place into your life and you become it, you go by it, and you live by it. So one thing that I've noticed, especially when you were on the race, and I've thought about even going in. You gave me an inspiration to try to. I'm not saying I'm going to do it right away, maybe in a couple of years, but one of my goals now is to do a full Ironman, and do some type of racing for myself, just to build a little bit more of mental toughness. And that's kind of one thing that I wanted to ask you, if you can maybe give us a principle that you have used in your life in order to build perseverance, something that kind of draws you, because I've seen in the race, and you can maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but I seen that you guys wouldn't be stopping too much, or maybe sleeping for too long, and to build that perseverance of like having the body tell you, like, okay, you need to slow down, I need to rest, or I need to eat, for you guys to keep going. Is there something that you have done in your life to build that up, and how you've done it, how have you got there?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think the underlying principle of that, I would simply just call strength.
Strength.
And I think over time, with our team, obviously our team is a very experienced team. We've done lots of racing and these sort of things and other things. But I think, you're right. You sort of use the word, perseverance. And I guess with that, I think of things, resilience comes into that, the ability to sort of suffer, to endure, deal with discomfort, to be uncomfortable, to be vulnerable. Those things to me all kind of come back, I think, to the underlying thing of strength. And I think speaking for myself, but I think when I answer these things, I think a lot of it would apply to my teammates as well. Like I think their pathways and their philosophies have been very similar, and then that's why we have all ended up in the same team. But certainly, as a teenager, growing up, one thing that was quite important to me as I sort of essentially, grew into my adulthood, I guess you could say, was just being strong, like being a strong person with a really high level of core strength. And I don't mean this by physical strength. While that is part of it, I think for me, a lot of it is more that kind of internal, essentially value-based kind of strengths, knowing that, it was as a young man, I was really intrigued to go out and sort of push myself. Very similar to what you're saying now, I think about, you're perhaps going and doing an Ironman and sort of testing yourself and training yourself and building up that kind of physical ability, but also with that, the sort of mental ability that is required to do something, fairly challenging like that. So I think it's always been important for me to be a strong person. And a lot of that is around just dealing with everyday life. Like I think to live in the world we live in, or certainly the Western world, that it's really, you do need a lot of discipline these days. There's lots of things that can sort of distract you from making good choices, I think. And that can be from health, what you eat, what you do with your spare time. A lot of it requires a lot of self-discipline to say, no, that food is not healthy for me. I can't keep eating, this food, or this lifestyle is not healthy. Like I actually need to be more active and pay, look after myself more. Or this job is not healthy for me, whatever it may be. I think a strong person will rise above those things and make those choices, because they will have I think more discipline to be able to say no to things and be able to take on challenges and things. So yeah, I think looking at the Eco Challenge or the race, the one thing our team does have collectively is a lot of strength. Now, obviously, we have a lot of physical strength because the tasks in front of us are largely physical. But to excel at that sport or to win that race requires a huge amount of mental strength as well. And that mental strength is really just the voice in your head that just says, I'm a strong person right now. All I want to do is stop and rest and sit down or sleep or whatever. But, that's not going to win us the race, or we're not going to reach the finish line with that attitude. So having that kind of mental strength is what's required to sort of say, hey, look, this is what's involved. This is the task at hand. You signed up for this. It's now or never. Suck it up and get on with it, sort of thing. So yeah, I think one of those principles would be probably the main word I would put to it is strength.
Okay, so I wrote down strength/discipline, right? So, but for you personally, has there been a way that you were able to build this up? Like, how did you build your own mental toughness? How did you build your own discipline? Like, was it something that I mean, just to give you an example, when you were on the race, your body's telling you like, okay, man, I need some rest. I need to eat. What is your mentality at that moment? Like, what is it something that you tell yourself, or how do you build it up to say like, okay, I'm not going to listen to that. I'm going to keep going.
For us, we know what's required to achieve highly in these events or in these challenges. So I think in that context, we know that you just have to keep going. You know, we have almost an unrelenting commitment to moving forward on the course. And I guess the philosophy behind that is that, you know, essentially, you know, when you stop, the gap between you and the finish line remains the same. So the whole object of the challenge is to basically reduce that gap between where we are as a team to actually reaching that finish line. So we kind of know from experience that we just have to keep moving forward. And our team is very, very disciplined about that. And I think when you watch the show, certainly when I watch the show, I'm not surprised, but I am surprised at how much time some of those other teams, you know, the rookie teams or the inexperienced teams, I'm surprised at how much time they spend not moving forward. And for a lot of them, that is actually the reason why they don't finish. It's not really their physical limitations. It is probably more their mental limitation that they don't have that drive, or they can't crucialize the importance of keeping that momentum. And then that will come with experience. But I think to answer your question, probably in a little bit more depth or context, is that, you know, if I went back to my teenage years to learn sort of the, I guess, the discipline and, you know, that internal strength and things, there's probably a number of things I could point to that contributed to that, but not one thing in particular.
Mm-hmm.
But as a young teenager, I actually went through a couple of years where I was pretty lost and I didn't really know my direction. And to give you a little bit of sort of background story to it is I am half Samoan. So my father is a Pacific Islander.
Awesome.
And yeah, it's cool. And when I grew up in New Zealand, there wasn't many ethnic diversity in the town that I live in. It was a very white town, and in many ways still is. But what that meant for me growing up as a teenager back in the 80s was there was some just small racial prejudice around, just mainly with kids, you know, like it was kind of, wasn't really meant to be harmful, but it was there. And I think what that meant is that often the Polynesian and the Maori children, who are the ethnic population of New Zealand, would tend to kind of gather together. I think that happens everywhere in the world. Unfortunately, in New Zealand, the Maori and Pacific Islanders are, in most cases, the lower socioeconomic kind of the ones who are struggling the most. So often that means is those kids end up getting into trouble and just causing mischief. And I was part of a group like that. I was kind of on the fringe as a teenager. So I went through a few troubled years, and that's why I actually ended up on the course doing the outdoor adventure program that I did. And part of that course was drug and alcohol kind of, I guess, management, or whatever you may want to call it. So as part of that course, I was identified as having sort of alcohol drinking sort of problems as a teenager. So I went through a program to stop drinking alcohol when I was 16 years old. And at the time, that was very, very tough for me. That was a really big challenge, but I knew that it was probably a challenge I needed to take on and to achieve. So throughout my teenage years, when all my friends were going to parties and drinking and having a good time, I was sober. I haven't drunk alcohol since I was 16 years old. And that taught me a lot about strength and about making sacrifices and about being disciplined. And as part of that program, what the tutors essentially did to give us the tools to deal with that was to replace essentially our addictions with a more healthy alternative. And for me, that was exercise. So at 16, I started running marathons. I started a real interest in endurance challenges. I was doing some crazy stuff, endurance-wise, as a young man growing up. And a lot of it for me was about distraction. It was really about, if I'm out running in the mountains, then I can't be in the city taking drugs and drinking and getting into trouble. So there was that unforeseen consequence of all that for me, because essentially after a few years of doing that, just escaping into the wilderness and going running and burning up that energy, I almost by accident started to become a very, very good athlete. And once I realized that, then I guess I've actually been on that pathway pretty much ever since.
Well, one quote that you said, and I wrote it down because I thought it was really good. You said, when you stop, your distance stays the same. I think it's very simple. It's a very simple quote, but I think it's very powerful, right? Because a lot of just not only on the race, but it can translate to a lot of things in life, right? You want to become good at something. And then you're just like, okay, well, just like you said, our times, in these times we have so much stuff that we can lose our focus on, and we drift everywhere else, that sometimes we forget the goal that we have. We stay stagnant. And it just made me think, as soon as when you said that is like, when you have a goal and you just stop, time doesn't stop, right? But at the same time, you're on the same distance. You still haven't advanced. So I really like that concept, that philosophy you have in mind. Another thing I got is, actually, when I was in high school, when I was in school as well, I had a little bit of problem as far as like drinking and stuff. And one thing that you really that I captured from you, and I really liked as well, was that there's so much energy that sometimes when we don't have anything to do in our society, sometimes we don't have a specific thing to do. Like, we're always sometimes at the house or with our friends, and our friends are always trying to do the same type of things, parties, and we don't have like a different culture to go into. So that energy gets stuck, and we kind of go with the flow. But one thing you said was like, once I got out of that and I start to get into the races and doing things, like, what you made me think was, you started to focus energy. Now that the energy you had, you started focusing on something, and now you were using it for your own good, right? And it made you grow. It seems like you got that energy, you understood, you focus it somewhere else, and now you were able to see like, okay, I like this better, and what I was doing wasn't right. So let me stay in this course. And I thought that was a really cool way to see your past, and like shifting it to something good. So I really like that. I just wanted to point that out.
No, that's good observation, and you know, I think you interpreted that correct. I think, you know, because I remember back when I was younger, and there was sort of two things I learned from the tutors on the course that I did as a teenager. One is that, you know, if you were to put people into kind of boxes, or essentially personality type kind of, I guess, types really, is that one thing I remember is they basically sort of, from the observation, said to me, essentially you have a very addictive type personality. Like, you're quite obsessive about things. And the other thing is that you're obviously very adventurous. So you like you like risk, and you like exploring, and you like sort of venturing into the unknown. And so when that energy was channeled into something, I guess, fairly negative, which was a life of just creating mischief and, small crime and drugs and alcohol, then if you take my addictive, kind of obsessive, adventurous personality, it's quite destructive. But as soon as you channel that in a different direction, then it opens up a whole new world. And
Awesome.
I've actually worked in that same space. I actually went full circle and became an outdoor educator, working on those very programs with young men, mainly young men, I should say. And quite a few times I remember talking to students who had done some really quite, bad things. And once I actually learned their story and heard about it, I saw a lot of the same things. And I remember saying to some students, it's like, man, if you could channel that energy and that dedication and that intelligence and that motivation into something positive, you will be hugely successful in life, because you've kind of got all the key things. At the moment, you're just on the wrong pathway. You're actually just on a pathway of destruction. But if you can just do a 180 turn, man, you will be successful, because you've kind of got, you've actually got the core qualities, I think, that will determine that. So yeah, interesting.
That's awesome. I like that. So you are helping other people now, kind of getting into the same.
I did for many years. I was an outdoor educator for sorry.
No problem.
I was an outdoor educator for about 15 years, pretty much until I had my own children. And then we sort of just changed focus a little bit more. And well, I've got 3 children, so life's pretty busy, but I'm still involved in some capacity. But yeah, I think you do have a pretty limited lifespan of working in that industry as well. It's a lot of time away from home, and it's a lot of energy going one way. So I did it. I sort of did my bit, my service.
Awesome. So to kind of jump into the second one, is there a second principle you might consider to be something you've used to be successful in not just your life, but as well as like in the race, other than the discipline and strength?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's a principle to me. I'm not sure if by pure definition this is a principle, but it feels like it to me, and that is perspective. And what I find in what I've sort of learned from sport, to succeed in our sport, and any sport that I've been in, actually, what I've learned to discover is that that it's very important to keep it in perspective. And almost, I guess, another way of looking at it is, if you have a sort of a loss of perspective, that can be detrimental to your goals. And really what I mean by perspective is that I think philosophically, often my mind often sort of steps back from everyday life, and I enjoy thinking about, the meaning of life and the purpose of life and why we're here, and why is this planet behaving like it is, and what are all these forces, what are all these things that are going on that enable me to be here at this point in time. And what I like about that style of thinking, and why it's good for me, is I start to kind of view things on a much, much bigger scale, and literally from a different perspective. Now, what I find when you go to an event like Eco Challenge, the world's toughest race, is you can easily start to believe that the future of human civilization is going to depend on the outcome of that event. And you can start to kind of make it be something much, much bigger than what it is. So in order for me to have my best possible performance and to help the team have their best possible performance, I find it very important to regularly just kind of remind yourself that, keep things in perspective. And what that essentially does is, I think it retains an element of sort of fun and enjoyment. And I think we've been lucky enough to race in many different countries around the world. I think I've raced in, I forget now, it's probably getting close to 40 different countries. And a lot of these races can go to what we would label third world countries. And, I think for me, some of those have been very insightful times when, I remember racing in Tibet in China many years ago. And, it's experiences like that where you can often draw very big contradictions, or I guess they can sort of put things in scale or put things in perspective. I've traveled from New Zealand to China to Tibet. I'm there with I've probably got, if I've got my bike, if I've got my mountain bike with me, and all my gear, I've got potentially $10,000 to $15,000 worth of state-of-the-art equipment. Wow. And, I've got the luxury of traveling to someone else's country and passing through their kind of homeland. But we go to these places and, we see the people living on the land, the nomadic people or the peasants, or, you get to see many different parts of the world and cultures and things. And I think during those times, it's really quite, it can be very reflective just to go, well, here I am thinking that this race is, really important, when these people out here, I mean, what's important for them is they get firewood that day so they can be warm at night, or that they can find some clean drinking water, or that they can, in some places that they can actually find some food to eat. So, I've always thought that, that what we do in our, this is coming back more to the race, the eco challenge in our sport. It is really a luxury thing that we do. We're very blessed, we're very privileged to have this opportunity. And I think it's really, I guess it's, in many ways, it's really only decadence if you take it for granted. So for me, it's always been very important to be appreciative and grateful for those opportunities, and to celebrate them, and just kind of remind ourselves how lucky we are. And that all basically circles back to the word of perspective. And, and I think that really helps our team perform the way we do, is that, we want to race well as a team, and we want to achieve our goals. But in the end, it's just one thing that we do that, on the grand scheme of life, it's actually not that important.
Wow. I was actually reading a book not that long ago, and it talked about this a little bit. And they said, okay, sometimes we focus on like why we're here, and we say, man, thanks to my mom, I'm here, right? And we see our world based on what's around us only. We don't see outside of that, right? And they give a point that it really makes you think. For me and for myself, at least, it made me think a lot. And they said, okay, it is important that your mom had you, but if the sun wasn't where it is, you wouldn't be here either. Right? So it's kind of like everything works, the universe, you can say, works around everything. Like, I believe in my point of view that there's a purpose for everything and for everybody. I believe that it could be very simple for you, and maybe you say like, okay, what is the scheme of what you're doing? But for me, like I said, you kind of spark something to say like, okay, you know what? I want to do a race. I want to challenge myself. So you could be, or you can see yourself, I will say, as a role model of telling people that you are able to make it, that building discipline can get you further ahead than other people. So I think that that's a really cool thing that you have, and you're an example to a lot of people, to show them that that is possible, that you can do things, that it's not just like, you know, like to settle. It's not good to settle, but you can stretch yourself to become somebody better. So just my point of view.
Yeah, no, thank you, thank you. That kind words, and you know, to be honest, that's one of the greatest things about this show coming out, the Eco Challenge, is that I've had a lot of messages from people who have watched the show and have just been inspired to go and do things at their own level. And to me, that is the success of what we do, is being able to spark that sort of thought process in people and say, hey, look, if they can do that, then surely I can do this, and to do that. And I think in relation to that, you know, what I would sort of hope that people have as well, or they pick up, is also it is that value or principle of perspective, in that it doesn't actually matter how you know, where you get or how you get there. It's more about, is kind of what you were saying, is that it's more about just that forward momentum, about challenging yourself and feel like, you know, I think everyone in life wants their life to feel progressive, I think.
Mhm.
And so, you know, as human beings, I think it's probably a survival kind of mechanism that we are always on a journey of self-improvement. So
Mhm.
people probably feel better if they feel like they're moving forward, and it
Mhm.
can just be in one area of their life. So whether it be in work or business or family or whatever it is. But I think if someone decides to just go out and they see Eco Challenge and they go, right, I need to just get, I need to have better health and fitness, so I'm going to start running 2 miles a day or something.
Mm.
I would hope and expect that, you know, once they're on that kind of journey and they start learning things like what we've talked about strength and self-discipline and healthy choices, whatever it be, but they just feel like, you know, that they are progressing and that life is actually kind of exciting, and there's lots of things to do out there, and I would almost guarantee that once people get on that journey, if you know, that once things start to kind of happen in one area of their life, it starts to spill over into the other areas as well, you know. So
Mhm.
yeah, I think yeah, if we can inspire people to get out there and make some sort of shift or change, that's awesome, that's great.
Great. That's awesome. One thing I wanted to talk about, and maybe if you're okay with, we can kind of jump into two more principles.
Okay.
The reason I want to kind of bring these up is because you were the person that lead the team. You direct 5 companies. So I feel like there's a very thin line between what you do and mental toughness to segue, to put in a segue towards leadership, and what you do as a leader of a team, as a leader of a company. Is there maybe a principle that you have applied into your life or to your business that made you a leader as you are right now, or is there a quality of character?
Probably from about the time I was 10 years old, I used to get reports from my teachers, like an end of year school report that I'd take home to my parents. And I remember a common thing that would be said on the reports was, Nathan is a natural leader, or Nathan has leadership qualities. And I had no idea what they were talking about. Like I wasn't aware of that. And I don't think it was really until my late teenage years that I, you know, did. And now often another comment, actually, while I'm thinking about it, another one was, is that you know, Nathan often leads his peers from within. He's not like an out the front leader. He kind of rallies people, and and gets people to side with them on things. So probably a lot of it's probably manipulation to get what I want, but um, I did start to sort of understand that more as I matured and got older. And I really don't know exactly why I have an interest in leadership, or why I somehow naturally developed some leadership skills. But I would just guess, and to be honest, I've never really thought about it until this moment, but I think a lot of it probably is, I am somewhat obsessed with efficiency. Like inefficiencies in things are probably the things that frustrate me the most. And I imagine that what happens when I get amongst a group of people or a team, if things are not being done efficiently, I just think I have to get involved and start to kind of try and create some change, or just get things working better. I just think it's the way my brain operates. And I think that naturally probably propels me into leadership roles, because I'm not afraid in a group to probably say, hey guys, if we're going to do this job, there's probably a better way we can do it. How about this, or how about that, or has anyone got any ideas, or something? Like, I think I just naturally want to do things more efficiently, and that naturally probably leads onto leadership roles. I think, you raised an interesting point about, there's quite a fine line between, I think that's what you were saying, between business and sport and various things. And I am involved in many business projects. I think I'm just entrepreneurial, have a few, I just like the excitement of developing things. But there is a lot of synergies. And I think what you learn as an athlete is that you have to be very organized. You obviously need to do a certain amount of training, but you have to manage a life as well as that. There's other things in life than training. For me, for example, I've got a house, I've got a family, I've got work, I've got training, I've got my team, all these things going on. So it forces you to be organized and well managed with your time, which is obviously very important for a successful business. I think also you learn the core things we've already talked about being disciplined and essentially working hard. To be a successful athlete, or any athlete really, is you need to put the time in. The rewards won't come without that investment of time. And again, that translates well into the business model. And then even more so than that, I think, is what you learn about being in a team, about what makes a functioning team, or what makes a dysfunctional team. And you learn a lot of those things in sport, and they translate across to business teams as well. I mean, I think a team is a team in whatever area you're in. But in terms of my leadership, if I was to put one principle or one word to my style of leadership, without a doubt, that word for me is composure. Like, just being composed. And it's one thing that I hope comes through on the Eco Challenge World's Toughest Race show, is that even in the face of adversity and discomfort and challenge, that our team is calm and composed. Because my experience has taught me that no good decisions have ever been made in the history of the world when people have been panicked and frazzled and angry, upset, or whatever it is. So it's kind of like, the more you can just be calm and composed, gather the information you need to make a decision, and then take the necessary time to make that decision, then chances are you'll make a good decision. And I think, watching the show myself, as I look, not so much our team, but I look at some of the other teams, and especially the teams that pulled out, I just think that they made decisions sort of based more on emotion, or based more on just the realities of the situation. I just think a more calm, composed environment to make those decisions, they probably would have made different decisions. And that's great, because I think that's why people keep going back to doing those sort of things, because they themselves realize that that they could improve. There's different ways they could do it. So I guess for me as a team captain, one of the things I say in my head at times is nothing will shock me. And what I mean by that is that in our sport of adventure racing, there's a lot of things that can go wrong. So we're out there for 4, 5, 6, 7 days. There's 4 of us, so keeping 4 people going for that long. The courses are often around 500 miles long, and we have equipment that can fail. We're subject to the weather, the wildlife out there, lots and lots of different things, navigation errors. So you can almost guarantee in an adventure race that there are going to be things that are going to really test your team, because the plan you had is going to unravel. And the ability to accept that and to find solutions and to move on is critical, because as we talked about before, is that the moment you stop, the gap between you and the finish line doesn't change, it remains static. So even if you are not physically moving forward on the course, if you are mentally moving forward to find a solution to a problem, I would consider that to be progressive. So for me, it is hugely important that when things do go wrong, and they are going to go wrong in our sport, that everyone remains calm, they remain composed, we accept the situation pretty much immediately, and then we go straight to finding solutions. And the sooner you can do that, then chances are, you're definitely going to minimize the interruption or the delay, but chances are it'll become mute. Like you'll actually solve the problem, be on your way, and it'll soon be forgotten. So I guess as a captain, it's very important for me that my teammates feel that I am always approachable. And by being composed, that keeps that channel of communication open. You can imagine that when you're out there, you've been out there for 4 days with very little sleep. There's a lot of times in those races where you just want to be home in bed and with your family and comforts of life. If a teammate has got an issue or a concern or a problem, or they've done something wrong or whatever it is, if they come up to me as a captain and share that, and my reaction is kind of to get angry or to be abusive or to, I don't know, just to kind of lose it, then chances are they're not going to come to me as much or at all, because they're going to be, man, I can't go to him because he's just going to lose it and get out of control and get angry and abusive and all these things. And that does happen in some teams. So for me, it's all about being composed and calm. So nothing will shock me. If a teammate comes up to me and says, hey man, got some bad news, this has just happened, or I've done this or whatever, then for me, it's kind of like, yeah, sweet as, man, that's cool. Let's look at this, let's fix this problem and be on our way, sort of thing.
How have you build that composure, that even maybe on a tough situation, just to give you an example, like let's say somebody breaks or twists an ankle, or it could be maybe a little bit more severe and you're in the middle of nowhere, like in order to not to panic and keep yourself composed, like how do you build that for yourself?
I think it's happened in 2 ways. One is more a practical answer, and that is in high performance sport and other areas of my life as well now, but it really comes from sport, is a question that I'll ask myself and that I've kind of encouraged our teammates to kind of, I guess, build into our team culture, is whenever you choose a behavior, whatever it may be, is to ask yourself a simple question, and that is, how is this helpful? So how you respond to something, I've always really encouraged my teammates who are peers of mine, so it's not difficult to do, but to sort of, before you say something or before you act, just quickly ask yourself, how is this helpful? because what I've noticed, I have been part of some dysfunctional teams before, and in sport and business. And often what I've found, probably more so from business, to be honest, is that people act in a certain way, say things in a certain way, send emails, and I'm left thinking, man, how is this helpful? This can only be destructive. You know, there's no positive outcome can be achieved from this kind of line. And so what I've done is, or what's very important to me, is to ask that question, how is that helpful? And I'll admit, you know, sometimes things will come into my mind. I can be out on the race course and one of my teammates can do something really dumb. And my initial thing is kind of like, man, you idiot. You know, what are you thinking? But I'm not going to say that, because it's, you know, the voice inside of my head says, how is that helpful? How is that going to help our team achieve the goal? All that's going to do is make that person feel bad or stupid or resentful towards me or whatever it may be. So I think, you know, I think I've learned over the years that, you know, that you just have to be composed in order to get the best out of your teammates, because otherwise you won't. So from a practical point of view, the second way I'll answer that question is probably a little bit more cultural, slightly spiritual, is that, you know, I think a lot of it has actually got to do with my heritage. Like, I think Pacific Islanders are pretty laid back, cool, cruisy people. You know, for people growing up in the Pacific Islands, I mean, half the day was spent lying under a coconut tree. I mean, there was no real urgency to do much. You know, they lived in paradise. There was an abundance of food. They lived in communities. You know, life was pretty chilled out. And I think genetically, I think I have actually managed to sort of have some of that come through into me, that, you know, just to kind of just chill out and be cool about things, just be calm, just don't get wired, you know, don't get sort of, I guess, hyped up about things too much, you know. So for me, you know, I think the composure thing has a real practical sort of benefit, but I think innately, you know, that sits well with my sort of cultural heritage as well. You know, that yeah, just stay cool.
All right. So your mentality is more or focusing on the end goal of knowing where you're going, and every step you're taking is kind of like, how is that going to help us to get there, right? So I guess it's a good leadership concept would be to keep the end goal in mind. And just like that person said, like, maybe I'm going to try one little thing and I'm going to probably get around the route that we have, and just to see what happens. And you don't think about if that's going to help or not. You just do it based on that, but you're not keeping the end goal in mind. So I thought, like, that's probably what your mentality might be. Am I correct?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. So I think, you know, in that sporting context is, you know, using the end goal is the finish line. And it's really about, you know, the mentality of our team is how do we get ourselves to the finish line in the shortest time possible. And one of the ways we're going to do that, there's going to be lots of ways we're going to try and do that, but one of the ways is being respectful to each other, about being truthful, about being compassionate, about being caring. And a lot of that will come back to helpful behavior and language and gesture. And that if anything anyone is doing at any given time is considered unhelpful, then that's not really aligned with the team goal of trying to get to the finish line as fast as we can. So yeah, I think it circles back. Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. One last question, if you don't mind, that I'm curious about. You say a lot about like mental toughness, right? That's what we were talking about. But when it comes down to racing and endurance, is there a regimen that you place yourself into when it comes down to nutrition, to eating? Is there something that you kind of focus on eating before the race, or how, and a little bit of the background of how you train, how far like how far back do you go, or before the race do you start training and you start kind of getting into the groove of preparing for it?
Sure, sure. So two things there, obviously, nutrition and training. So in terms of nutrition, I've had a real interest in sports nutrition my whole adult life.
Mm-hmm.
And I've tried many different things. A lot of the different eating plans or dietary choices, I guess you could say some of the fads that have come through sports nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
And I have basically come to the conclusion from just testing things on myself and finding out what works best for me is to actually just eat a pretty normal, what I consider to be a pretty normal balanced diet. And for me, really what that is, when I think about what that is, it is just avoiding as much processed food as you practically can. So, and I'm guilty of eating all sorts of food, you know, junk food and fast food and various things, but it's just not that often. So I think a couple of things around that is that, I don't know, it's been a while since I was in the United States, but I know in New Zealand, the way our supermarkets work or our grocery stores work is that all the perishable food they put on the outside aisles because they need to change that food daily. So when you go into a New Zealand grocery store, the first aisle that you go down will be fruit and vegetables. And then if you go down the back of the grocery store, there'll be fresh meat and fish and sort of protein type sort of food. And then if you go down the third kind of, pyramid aisle, there'll be sort of grain type stuff and dairy. So, milk and cheese and bread and things. So a very simple way of grocery shopping for me, if I want to eat healthy food, is only to buy food from the outside aisles, which is essentially just fresh, perishable food that in most cases how nature intended it to be eaten. As soon as you start going into the inside aisles, that's where you start to get the packaged, processed, frozen type foods, which are generally speaking harder for your body to digest. So for me, especially when I'm training for a race, a day will normally start with me having for breakfast, will just be some fresh fruit, good cereals. Often I just make my own cereal with oats and coconut and dried fruit and things. Often the commercial ones are full of sugar, so I try and avoid those. For lunch can just be something simple like some quality bread with some avocado and maybe some quality meat, various things. And then, dinner is, in New Zealand, we're very lucky. We have a lot of really good, fresh proteins. So I do eat meat about 2 or 3 times a week, whether it be fish or beef or whatever, but we buy very good quality meat, plenty of vegetables. I drink a lot of coffee. I just take it straight black, but that's one of my things I do really enjoy. And then I think we just, we're like every other family, like we'll bake cakes and have ice cream and, sometimes we'll get takeaways or fast food, but we just limit those things, So generally our food is what I consider to be fairly normal, balanced kind of diet. And we're an active family as well. So we're burning a lot of calories. So, we can sort of sometimes get away with having a few more treats, I think, but we're just mindful of that. In terms of training, I would say that it's pretty difficult to kind of explain my training in a couple of sentences, but I'll give it a go. But largely, I think it'd be fair. The first thing I'll say is that all our teammates do different training. So we independently train and get ready for the race. But for me, I have a very active lifestyle. So even with my job, a lot of the work I do, I can be out in the field, hiking and biking and paddling and things. So, I stay fairly active. If I'm not working in the field, then I'm often just at home in the office. Like today, I have an office day. If I've got an office day, I will aim to do 1 or 2 hours of exercise at some time during the day. So this afternoon, I'm going to go kayaking, maybe 1 hour or 90 minutes or something, and that'll be my exercise for today. So I'm generally aiming for 1 to 2 hours of exercise per day. And that's every day throughout the whole year. That's just for my health and well-being. About 6 weeks before a big race like Eco Challenge, I'll block out my diary. So I'll try and limit the amount of work and limit the amount of commitments that I have. And that's when I'll start being a lot more scientific about my training and doing key sessions. And that will be training, generally speaking, sort of between 20 and 40 hours per week. So, I guess you could say most days I'm looking to do 4 to 6 hours of training during that period. But I think, it's important to kind of acknowledge that I have been racing for 30 years. Wow. And I've done about 50 of these, what we consider to be expedition length races. So I think all that training and all those years mean that my starting point is at a certain level. So, I can train relatively quickly to that level to be able to race at that level. Some people would probably have to do quite a lot more training than I do, I guess, is what I'm saying. The other thing is that I'm 48 now, and I am not the athlete I used to be. Like, I'm definitely starting to slow down, and it takes me a bit longer to recover from training. So I don't know how many more years I can sort of, justify being in a team that's trying to win these races. Finishing's no problem, but winning, that's another challenge.
Well, those are good perspectives. I think I'm gonna use some of your information when I do the Ironman. Yeah. I can use that for my own advantage. The last thing I want to tell you, Nathan, is thank you for being here and spending some time with us and giving us like really valuable information. We really thank you for it. Is there any way that if people want to maybe connect with you or reach out to you, what will be the best way? Is it Instagram, Facebook?
Yes, any of those ways is fine. I have got a website that people have been emailing me through my website, which is just nathanfave.nz. I recently signed up to Instagram, and I've been getting some great messages through that. And I've got a Facebook page as well. So anything's fine if people want to reach out, have got any questions or whatever. I usually can make time to kind of reply to them. So that's all good. And no, thank you for inviting me on. It's always interesting and good to chat about these things. And for me, just to think about these things front of mind is always beneficial as well. So I just hope that your listeners have some takeaway things, and I wish them luck and good luck for your Ironman.
All right. Well, appreciate it. I'm pretty sure that they will. I got some stuff already. I got a lot of notes, so yeah, cool. It was pretty good stuff. I appreciate it once again, Nathan, and like I said, we'll stay in contact. And thank you guys for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed it. And if you guys want to connect with Nathan, please follow him on Instagram. He's a pretty cool guy that you guys can follow and pretty inspirational. So thanks again, and we'll see you soon.